Welcome into another edition of Talkin Ducks. A lot to get to today, and we'll talk about the up and down season for Oregon men's basketball. A wild weekend for them continues. Plus, we'll talk more about the latest recruiting and transfers for Oregon football. And then Justin Herbert, after that disappointing loss for the Chargers against the Jaguars, we'll discuss whether or not Los Angeles is the best long-term fit for the former Oregon quarterback great. But let's go ahead and get to our opening tip, brought to you by Les Schwab Tire Centers, where they've been doing the right thing since 1952. And we start things off by going one-on-one with Aaron Fentress, so don't expect a lot of shot making or defense being played here. But Aaron, the roller coaster continues, and I hope you like wild rides for Oregon men's basketball. After suffering one of the largest home losses in program history to Arizona State, they bounce back 2 days later and knock off a top 10 team in Arizona and beat them handily, thanks in part to the return of Jermaine Kuznar knocking down threes, and then N'Faly Dante baptizing folks, dunking on everybody, especially that opening play. What did we learn about this win for Oregon against Arizona? What was the biggest takeaway here?
I don't know. I mean, make it make sense. Nothing with this team makes sense. I mean, didn't they last week get blasted by Colorado and then beat Utah? Yeah. So this team is as Jekyll and Hyde as you can get. At least they're showing the potential to be really good. But there's a couple of things. One, for me, the three-point shooting is just so bad, 29.7%. I don't know how you survive long-term with that. That has to improve. And in this game, you just mentioned Jermaine Cuisinart. Sorry. He was 9 for 14 from the field, 6 for 9 from threes, right? The rest of the team, though, 5 for 23 on threes. He had a huge game after 3 subpar games. Is he back? If he's back, then that obviously changes everything. But you can't count on him and finally combining for 18 for 25 from the field. You can't count on that. Now, the thing that really showed some promise was defense. They held Arizona to 37.5% shooting. And Altman has said every year that if we can play good, solid defense, the offense is going to come and go, but you can win close games if you're playing good defensively. So if that's in lockstep with what he wants, then I think they have a chance to maybe rattle off some wins. But they've been so inconsistent offensively and defensively that I can't view this as anything other than an upset victory that doesn't mean anything to me long term until they rattle off successive victories.
So what do you do to bounce back after that very disappointing defeat to Arizona State to then just come right back and beat Arizona? Well, for Dana Altman, listen in on what he did in order to light that fire with this Oregon team.
You know, don't sleep, and get up Friday morning and just take off down Interstate 5. I didn't know if I was going to stop or not. I couldn't sleep, so made it close to Roseburg. But, just trying to think, clear my head, what do we got to do to get them going? The staff's great. You're disappointed in yourself when you can't get a team to play hard. That's, as a coach, that's your first responsibility. And so it just drives me nuts and bothers me the most when we don't compete. We've played bad before and lost games, but our competitiveness can't be what it was Thursday night or the previous Thursday night against Colorado. I mean, that's just not basketball. That's not what we want, what we can have. We can't tolerate that. That's non-negotiable. We can't have those kind of efforts. But how do you get that across to your team? It doesn't do any good for my staff to know it. Me bark at them. It doesn't do us any good. How do we get it across to your team? And I knew yelling and screaming at him wasn't going to do it, so we just talked about who are we, challenge him a little bit with, when we've won. We're about, when we hold people under 70, I think we're about 90%, aren't we, winning games? When we out-rebound people, we're about 90% winning games. I never claimed to be very smart, but 90% is good. And if playing hard, you can accomplish those things even if you don't shoot it well, because you're not going to shoot it well every night. And that's probably what I've been disappointed in. When we don't hit shots, we give in to it. And again, that's another sign of a poorly coached team. You don't play hard and you give into it, You either got a bad coach or he's not getting through to his players. And so, disappointed, myself, and because those kind of efforts, those hurt. Now, that hurts your program. And so to see him respond like that, is great. It's great, but consistency, maturity, toughness. What are we going to do Wednesday at Cal, which has traditionally been a tough place for us to play, or Stanford, which is a tough place for us to play?
Well, listen, you ever need to figure things out in life, apparently take that long drive down to Medford. But the big question for Oregon basketball is whether or not this is really them turning the corner or just another dip and rise in this roller coaster. We'll see if they can put together back-to-back games this upcoming week. All right, Aaron, listen, I've loved my time with you, but we got to bring in a little bit more help here. We're going to talk a little bit of football. Joey Harrington, Anthony Newman will join us. A couple of new transfers. How much will it impact the Oregon defense? Stick around, we're just getting started on Talkin Ducks. You're watching Talkin Ducks, built by Par Lumber. Welcome back. Time now for some excellence on the football field, brought to you by Ferguson Wellman. Ferguson Wellman, a disciplined approach to investing in. For this one, we're going to start with Anthony Newman. Anthony, a couple of big-time transfers joining Oregon to help on the defensive side. First, you start with the brother of Bennett Williams, Evan Williams, the safety from Fresno State. He comes to Oregon, following in the footsteps of his brother. And then how about on the defensive line, Jordan Birch, a former 5-star recruit from South Carolina, will come all the way coast to Oregon to help out. And now you look at some of these holes for this Oregon defense and some of the players that got plugged in here, Anthony. And what do you make about the trajectory of this Oregon defense now that you look at these two key additions?
Well, I'm so excited about an edge rusher that can get to the quarterback and about a safety who can cover slot receivers. And Bennett Williams was a stud, okay, but he's more of a safety type. He's moving on to the NFL. His brother, Evan Williams, is a guy who is a stud, and he can cover slot receivers. He had like 68 tackles for Fresno State. This guy's a baller. Jordan Birch, wow. Talk about a guy that they needed up front. Now, we're also happy about Brandon Dorlus comes back, but to add Jordan on the outside. Now, Jordan had 60 tackles. DJ Johnson only had 36 tackles or 38 tackles. I think Brandon Dorlus had 38 tackles. So just Jordan is a stud. Here's another stat that people don't think about. QBH, quarterback hurries. Jordan had 14 quarterback hurries. He was getting to the quarterback. He's making the quarterback throw the ball sooner than he wants to. That is huge. So right now, guys, the defense is getting better.
Oh, that patented always getting better. Now, Aaron, do you agree with that sentiment now that you look at the pieces that have been added to this team?
Absolutely. They had to replace Bennett, and might as well do it with another Bennett. And he's also a big hitter, too. If you watch film on him, that guy has a nose for the ball, and he's going to come lay the helmet on anyone in his way, blockers as well. Fun fact about him real quick, his dad, Gary Williams, played defensive back at Cal. And in 1982, he was on the field during arguably the most famous kickoff return ever, Cal against Stanford, called The Play. He was actually in pitch position a couple times, but never got the ball, but he was involved in that play. And obviously his sons learned a lot from him in terms of playing defensive back. So that's a great addition. We talked last week about Dorlus coming back, but they need pass rush help. Obviously, Birch is going to give them that. Only 4.5 career sacks, but like Newman said, hurries, man. Sometimes hurries can be more valuable than sacks because what happens when you hurry a quarterback sometimes? They throw it up for grabs and then someone like Newman picks it off. So I like these moves for the Ducks.
Well, yeah, Oregon's defense is now completely fixed and every wrong has been righted, and they will now average 0 yards per game given up on the defensive side of the ball. So I think they've gotten better, right? Right,
Yes.
Anthony?
Getting better.
Yes, getting better.
Look, it's just so tough for me now to wrap my mind around, and I get it. I mean, I should say it like this. I have wrapped my mind around the idea that we now have college free agency, right? I have a hard time understanding or analyzing how this all kind of fits together, right? Because when you've got guys that you bring in and you recruit and you develop and you see them come up in the program and you say, oh, this is what this guy does well and this is how he fits with the rest of the defense and here's where you need to plug a hole, you can kind of see that develop. There's a certain aspect of really not knowing what you have, right? Sewell's gone. DJ's gone. Gonzalez gone. We're bringing in a guy from South Carolina that, great, love to have him. Why is he leaving? There's, you're a 5-star guy at an SEC school, Spencer Rattler coming back. Why are you leaving? Like, there's just all this, I don't want to say up in the air, but for me, it's tough to make a real analysis of what you have for next year because so many of the pieces are going to change year to year. But, I think that's the nature of college football now. I mean, college football is no more. This is minor league, mostly semi-professional football now.
I agree with everything Joey said, but I want to add one thing. This coaching staff last year hit home run after home run after home run on transfers. So I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt that these two guys are going to have a major impact. But Joey's right. We don't know exactly.
This is not an indictment of the coaching staff.
No, I know you're not saying that. I'm just
of what they have when I don't know what it kind of looks like.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I know what you're saying.
Well, it's nice to see you guys on agreement on something for once in a while, and we'll see if these coaches can take this transfer talent and some players looking for greener pastures and turn them into studs like we saw last year with what the Oregon coaching staff did with some of their key transfers. But we now ask the question here, how do you play 10 years of college football? Well, you're Cam McCormick, and Aaron, this is a wild story. We won't get year 8 of Cam McCormick, and we love the resolve of this kid, and we're so proud of him for battling through so many injuries. Cam McCormick has decided to transfer to Miami. We wish him well there. He's going to get a chance to get reunited with Mario Cristobal. But, Aaron, this has got to be one of the most unique situations in college football. I mean, 10 possible years of college football. I know you wanted to say something about this whole situation.
It absolutely is. And this guy went to hell and back. I mean, the injuries this guy went through, and not just the injuries, but then the surgeries that didn't go right with the injuries and things falling apart with hardware in his foot, creating more injuries, and then coming back the way he did, and then blowing out his Achilles against Ohio State, and then coming back again. He's going to the perfect place going to Miami to play for Mario Cristobal. One, he's going to play for a coach who knows him, and a coach that he was going to start for had he not been injured. He actually had beaten out Jacob Breland, who was the returning starter, but then injuries set back Cam McCormick. I think he's a legitimate NFL caliber blocking tight end. Cristobal hopes to turn him into more of a passing tight end as well, but I think he's on par, if not better, than Evan Bayless, Johnny Munt, 2 Oregon tight ends that had careers in the NFL. Munt still playing in the NFL. So this is a great story. I hope it works out for him, but man, if ever there was a player, I mean, this guy played for 4 coaches. He was recruited, redshirted actually under Helfrich, played for Taggart, played for Mario, played for Lanning. That's unprecedented. And I think he's got like 14 degrees. If he had stayed at Oregon, he could have been the first ever doctor tight end combo. But he's moving on to Miami. Great kid, great family. Got to know them very well. I did a couple long articles on sort of everything he's gone through. So happy he landed in a good spot.
I'll tell you this much, the amount of gear this kid is about to have is going to be insane. But Cam McCormick, we wish you well. We love you, man. Best of luck down in Miami. All right, still plenty more Ducks to come when we come back. A schedule teaser. Oregon releases their 2023 football schedule. A lot of games to highlight, a wonderful home slate, including in non-conference play. A former Duck might get a chance at some payback against Oregon. We'll let you know, and we'll break it down when we come back on Talkin Ducks. You're watching Talkin Ducks, built by Par Lumber. Welcome back. Time now for our legendary moment, brought to you by Abby's Legendary Pizza. And the 2023 Oregon football schedule is out, baby, and there are some bangers on this one. You go up and down this schedule, and there's some games that certainly stand out. But let's go ahead and go around the horn and start with Joey here. Joey, you've had a chance to digest this schedule and look it over. Which game or games really stand out to you that you might potentially highlight?
Well, it's not necessarily the game as much as it is the week leading up to it. Against Washington, both teams have a bye leading into that game. I mean, that is going to be, you can highlight Oregon State, USC, Utah, Washington, for a variety of different reasons. But there's a very strong possibility that the conference championship will come through either Oregon or Washington in some respect. And so for both of those teams to have a bye leading into it, to get healthy, to get prepped, to get motivated, that's going to be a big matchup with a lot of not just conference implications, but a lot of, let's call it, pent up emotions sitting on it for an extra week.
Okay, Aaron, how about you? What game are you looking at?
Oh man, I'm looking at SC at home and at UW. Those are the two big ticket games. I mean, they have to go to Utah as well, I believe, but no UCLA. And of course, Oregon State's going to be tough. But if this is going to be a playoff team, and we know that's the goal.
The entire schedule, I think he just did. You just listed them all.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah,
you don't want to miss
one,
anything in there, Aaron.
We know that's the goal. Then UW, USC are going to be the two biggest games to me. And there's no Georgia this time around. You got Texas Tech instead. So I think there's a nice little path there to at least make a run at the make a run at the conference title. But if you can defeat UW and USC, then you have a chance to actually win the conference with a 12-1 record, maybe, and get yourself in playoff position. So we'll see. All
right, Anthony?
Well, Aaron stole my thunder. There's no Georgia on the schedule as the first game. You like playing those teams, no doubt. You're not ducking teams here. But to play them first, you're a new coaching staff. Well, now you're in your second year of coaching. You got some new guys coming. Let's ease into the season. And you're going to play your Pac-12 team. You're going to play USC. You're going to have Washington. But you got some time to get to those schools. When you start off with a team like Georgia, that is very difficult. I'm looking at USC at home. That's going to be a game. You talk about an offense with USC that can score. Now, I've said this all year. They don't have a defense, so their defense will be tested against Oregon's offense and Bo Nix. But that's going to be a pretty good ball game right there.
All right, thanks for sharing, guys. But I'm a little disappointed that there's one game you all kind of glazed over, and that's the regular season finale at Autzen Stadium, Oregon versus Oregon State. This could decide everything. And for Oregon State, everybody's been saying, if they could just get a quarterback, well, guess what? They got their guy from Clemson. So this is an Oregon State team that could be one of the best teams, not only in the Pac-12, but in the country. And if everything goes according to paper, this game at the end of the season could potentially decide a spot in the Pac-12 championship game, and it has a chance to go down as one of the all-time great rivalry matchups. And the Ducks are very lucky that they got the draw where they host Oregon State this year, because we all know what happened in Corvallis last season. So either way, I think this has the chance to be the most important game of the season for Oregon if you look at how things might go. All right, don't go anywhere. When we come back, we'll talk a little Justin Herbert. Extremely disappointing loss in the playoffs. What does this mean for his long-term status in Los Angeles? Are the Chargers the best fit? We'll let you know when we come back on Talkin Ducks. You're watching Talkin Ducks, built by Par Lumber.
Obviously a tough go for us. As an offense, we need to do more in the second half, and that falls on us offensively. And as a quarterback, I need to perform better, and you got to be able to put up more than 3 points in the second half. And so I feel horrible for the defense for the incredible effort they put out there today, but got to be better as a team. It's really tough because we think really highly of our team, and that's a special group of guys in that locker room, and they deserve better, and it didn't go our way, and that's the unfortunate part. And guys put everything they had into it this year, and especially this game, and you hate to see it go that way. But I know that everyone in that locker room who comes back is going to use this one for fuel for the next year, and they're excited to get back to work. And definitely tough to process, but got to keep it going and use this one as fuel.
All right, Aaron, let's go with you. That was Justin Herbert after an extremely disappointing playoff loss, the third largest comeback in NFL history, and it happens in the playoffs. The Chargers led 27-0 over the Jags in the first half. They picked off Trevor Lawrence 4 times, only to lose on a last-second field goal in the second half. The ripple effect, the Chargers fired their quarterback coach and offensive coordinator, yet retain their head coach. And so the question is, how much of this does this fall on Herbert's shoulders? And then what do you make about the direction for Justin Herbert as he has yet another coordinator and quarterback coach moving into next season?
Yeah, it's all wild when these kind of things happen, how much falls on the quarterback's head. To me, this was a a team collapse, and Herbert is a part of the team. If you look in the first half, they had touchdown drives of 16 and 18 yards, which was set up by those interceptions. So Herbert didn't have to do much to generate those touchdowns. He did lead another touchdown drive of way through for like 50 yards on the drive. But the only thing he's really guilty of is not having a great moment to elevate his team and get another touchdown drive in the second half. If you can produce that, you probably win the game. So, but he didn't do anything wrong in terms of turning the ball over or playing horribly. He just didn't have a great game. So I don't blame him. It's a team loss. If you got 27-point lead, your defense can't fall apart the way they did. So it was just one of those things. As far as continually changing coaches, Joey can speak to that better than I can in terms of quarterbacks. But in the history of the NFL, when you give a quarterback different coaches all the time, especially when they're young, you're going to jumble their brains a little bit. So I don't think that's good. There's been rumors out there that maybe Sean Payton was interested, but those went away because they retained their coach. But maybe if it doesn't work out next year, you go get some marquee, proven Super Bowl champion coach to come in and handle Justin Herbert's development.
Now, Joey, I obviously want to get your perspective as a former player. And for Herbert, you look at the yards that he's put up in his 3 years, just past Andrew Luck for the most yards ever in a quarterback's first 3 seasons. And I feel like he's doing it like one of these cooking shows where there's a bunch of random ingredients in the middle of the stage and they say, hey, go grab that and make a meal out of it. With all of the injuries, the way he became a starter his rookie season, and then all the coaching changes, I'm more interested in the long-term prospect for Justin Herbert and this relationship with the Los Angeles Chargers. Is this the best fit for him? In your playing experience, when you look at where a quarterback needs to be and what there needs to be around him to be successful, what do you see for Herbert?
Well, Aaron said it a minute earlier. I had 8 head coaches in 7 years. Which, yes, exactly. Yep, exactly.
Who was your favorite?
Who was my favorite? I liked Nick Saban a little bit. I liked Sean Payton. Definitely not Bobby Petrino.
Least favorite? Yeah, he dipped out mid-season, didn't he?
Yeah, he was just like, and I'm out. Anyway, but this is not about me. It's about him. So here's my thought if I'm Justin. It's tough to really think about yourself when you are such a selfless guy. Right, that is who Justin is. Right, he is a team first guy. I mean, whether it's not wanting to be introduced to in starting lineups and running out of the tunnel, or whether it's always giving guys credit, like he is truly a stay out of the limelight kind of guy. Those type of players often try and think of what's best for the team, right? But what is potentially best for the team may not be best for him long term, right? There's a potential. I don't know if they're going to offer him a new contract this year. Would they try and play another year out on his contract before? But depending on how this offensive new OC goes, you got an aging Keenan Allen, you got a Mike Williams who can't stay healthy. You got guy. I don't know. I mean, I might seriously take a look at the idea of playing out your contract and then testing the free agency market to find a place that truly wants to invest in you and your success. But that's a really tough thing for somebody who's come out of college and come out of a place. Remember, he came back for his senior year, right? He was loyal to his team. He was loyal to his school, loyal to his community. And I worry that Justin won't look out for himself. Let's just put it that way. I want to make sure that in this whole situation, like you said, he has been an absolute star. I want to make sure that he is allowed to be that star that I think we all see that he could be.
Do you think the Chargers are the best long-term fit for Justin Herbert? Or do you see another situation out there for him that might allow him to excel and be able to reach some of these things that he's shown the potential that he can get to based upon his playing ability as a quarterback?
I mean, if I were him and I had the choice, which he's going to have the choice, I would try to go to New England maybe and play with Belichick if Belichick's going to keep coaching for a long time. You'd want to go to a place with a marquee proven head coach that has stability. You don't want to just go somewhere where someone has instability and they could be gone as well, which we've seen happen all over the NFL because it's such a what have you done for me lately league. That all said, My man's in Los Angeles. Like, if you can stay there and be a star quarterback with those locks he's got flowing, right? You can do a lot of damage off the field financially. So I think he's too young to worry about that. I think maybe if you're unsure about the franchise, you sign a contract where you have an opt-out after a couple seasons so you can make another decision if things aren't going well. And then maybe you also start throwing your weight around with your agent saying, hey, look, what are you going to do for Justin? Because we can't be playing this musical chairs at quarterback. Look what happened to Joey. Look what they did to Joey.
Well, it's going to be fascinating for Justin Herbert over the next couple of years as far as whether or not he wants to stay. He will certainly have plenty of suitors when he does become a free agent, but that's going to be a big-time decision for number 10. All right, don't go anywhere. When we come back, Dan Rubenstein, host of the Solid Verbal podcast, former Oregon alum, he'll join us and talk more about college football, where the Ducks rank, can they catch Georgia, and grade Dan Lanning's first season. More Talkin Ducks when we come back. You're watching Talkin Ducks, built by Par Lumber. Welcome back. Time now for What's Cooking, brought to you by Sam's Northwest BBQ, located in Sherwood, just south of Portland. Your home for Yoder Smoker products and so much more. And joining us from the Solid Verbal podcast, friend of the show, Oregon alumni Dan Rubenstein. And Dan, how we doing? First of all, I've got to catch up with you because I know you're always doing something pizza related. What's the most recent?
Ooh, man, good question. So I've been messing around with some white pies. So it's tomato sauce-less. So I'm charring some vegetables. I hit it with some lemon zest this past week. I mean, I'm still doing the standard, pepperoni, jalapeno, hot honey, all that kind of stuff. But I'm trying to master both the white pie and also getting my Detroit dough as airy and crispy as possible. And I get some shrinkage sometimes. Get your mind out of the gutters. A little bit of shrinkage in the pan. So I'm sort of riding the edges a little bit with my Detroit. So it's all good.
So I got to ask you, I mean, you step up from, traditional crust, I guess. You're going to Detroit. What is the most complicated type of pizza that you feel like you can make someday? What's the goal, the pinnacle of all this here?
It's still probably getting the Detroit right. And the other big goal to me is getting an actually sized deck oven to make bigger pies. Because right now I can kind of max out 14. If I put it on a screen, 16 inches. But I'd like to get a bigger oven with more control, both for the underheating element and the sort of radiant heating element, to get to like an 18-inch pie would be a goal of mine. The more New York size pie.
All right, what would you rather have? Your own pizza joint on campus at Oregon,
okay,
or lifetime box seats in the press box or the luxury box at Autzen Stadium for life?
Oh, it's Autzen. I don't have to work. I just have to watch and consume.
Yeah.
Here, I will consult with a pizza place in Eugene to get my recipe and my process out there and just take a cut, just take a fee. I don't want to run it. I don't want to live in Eugene making pizza. I want to live in Eugene going to Oregon games and running Priest Trail. So yeah, it's absolutely Autzen. No, and I can bring the pizza to the box because if I'm enough of a bigwig to have that access, I'm BYOP.
Yeah, there you go. Once you bring your own box and you have access to those, you'd be close to Dan Lanning and his crew. And let's get to Oregon football here. That's obviously why we want to catch up with you here. Year one underneath Dan Lanning, I mean, he comes in higher expectations than normal for a first-year coach based upon Oregon's history. But once the dust is settled from the season, you look at how things ended up with that Holiday Bowl victory. Where do you rank or grade his first season as Oregon head coach?
Mostly very, very good. I'm especially when you consider the overhaul on the roster that occurred, especially at quarterback, and the uncertainty around how good Bo Nix would be starting over at a new place in a new conference, and the way that the recruiting class kind of fell apart when Mario Cristobal left, and there were the defections on both sides of the ball. I thought before the season started, I thought they did a great job rebuilding that roster and getting the roster to buy in, roster that wasn't recruited by him. Obviously, it started out terribly, but now that we have the full scope of what Georgia football in 2022 was, I suppose it could have been worse. So yeah, they did not look prepared for that game, which had his stock down for me. But over the course of the next few weeks, especially when you look at the UCLA game, I thought Dan Lanning and that staff, especially Kenny Dillingham, Oregon finished as the #1 most efficient rushing team in the nation. The percentage of attempted runs and successful runs, 5+ yards, or getting the chains moving efficiently, was better than any other team in the country, and that's including that Georgia game. So the steps forward they took on offense, the offensive line was great. Defense was kind of a low-key or high-key nightmare at times, but other than the last quarters, which is very tough to say, of the Oregon State and Washington games, can't lose to Oregon State and Washington if you're the Oregon coach. Even if it's your first year, you have a more talented roster, you have leads, you have the game in your grasp. I'd say it's somewhere hovering in that B+, A- range, because so much of the sport is roster construction, roster buy-in, and then finishing. And so he really nailed 2.5 of those 3. And so the future looks bright. I think he has, I forget what the old, is it like the clutch gene, whatever, that Skip Bayless used to make fun of LeBron with? He's got the killer gene. I think Dan Lanning is a killer. I think if a player is not working out at a position, Dan Lanning is not going to be loyal just because he had been playing there. Just because a coach he has a connection with. If the coach and the position group aren't working out, Dan Lanning, I think, has the mentality and has the skill set and has the relationship building abilities of a top tier coach. I'm in.
Yeah, it really just feels like getting that game experience where seasons can sometimes come down to a couple of snaps. And that's the argument for Oregon, is you're probably 3 or 4 different play calls away from winning 12 games this year, which is just wild in your first season. But now it comes down to roster construction, and a good part of that, at least, is consistency at quarterback. How excited are you that Bo Nix decided to come back after his most successful season? His NFL stock probably hasn't been higher, and he decides to come back for another year at Oregon.
Extremely excited. And again, didn't anticipate feeling this way before last season, before this season, especially given the roller coaster that was quarterback recruiting these past few weeks for Oregon, with Dante Moore, a longtime commit, making his way down to UCLA, decommitting last second, but Oregon flipping Austin Novosad from Baylor. Bo Nix is a steadying influence. Bo Nix is 37 years old, or however old he is, and that's sort of a new reality in the sport where you're going to have grown-ups playing certain positions, not college kids. And Bo Nix as a stabilizing influence behind what should be a new-look offensive line. I think Josh Connerly is going to step in at one of the tackle positions, the highly touted recruit, and obviously recruiting the top flight transfers from, I think it's Rhode Island and Texas, Junior Angelo and Johnny Cornelius. I'm in off-season form right now.
Yes.
But having that stabilizing influence at quarterback, returning what they do at receiver, returning what they do at running back, having Bo Nix there for another year, it's enormous, because I think the defense is going to look pretty different in terms of who's starting, and there's a bunch of transfers coming in that I think are going to compete for roles. So with a new coordinator, having Bo Nix, having a lot of experience, having the proof of concept of whatever they bring over from Kenny Dillingham's version to now Will Stein's version of the offense, I think Oregon is in as good a position at quarterback as any team in the conference, and I include USC and Caleb Williams in that.
Well, you mentioned other quarterbacks in the Pac-12, and with the recent news of Cam Rising coming back for Utah, a lot of teams can share that same sentiment that, hey, we're in the best position we've ever been in years at quarterback. You look at the transfers, the fact that Penix is coming back. How do you feel like this conference is shaping up? Because to me, at least, it feels like there's never been more excitement about Pac-12 football. Oddly enough, going into the final year of how the Pac-12 will look like with USC and UCLA, as far as the teams that are coming back, the talent, and especially the quarterbacks.
I feel terrific about it. Just as somebody who loves watching Pac-12 football, it has almost a vintagey feel. And I don't know if it weren't for the Bay Area schools looking kind of questionable at the moment at quarterback, it feels like we're looking back at an era where it's like, oh, Sam Keller or Rudy Carpenter at ASU, and Dennis Dixon is at Oregon, and Jonathan Smith, who has stayed at Oregon State now. Jonathan Smith is at Oregon State. Like Jake Locker's at Washington, where you have everybody with their guy, right? That like they're familiar, they're successful, and not that the games are always shootouts, but that these teams are built around strong, experienced quarterbacks. And you're right, when you look at Cam Rising, Caleb Williams, and I assume whoever's starting at UCLA will be pretty good because it's Chip Kelly. Michael Penix, as you mentioned, now DJ Uiagalelei, who, while I think would be the first to say he was a little bit disappointed with how things went at Clemson, a huge talent, a big body, a huge talent, and more talented than any quarterback Oregon State has had ever. Just in terms of that, the athletic ability and the arm strength. So, no, it almost has this wall-to-wall feel of not necessarily any given Saturday, but if you're going to criticize the Pac-12 in years past about the level of play, I think it's going to be less of an opportunity this year because of where the offenses should be.
All right, stick around. We'll continue our conversation with Dan when we come back, and we'll take a look at Georgia and see how far behind Oregon is from the Bulldogs and whether or not Georgia is just simply lapping the field in college football. Plenty more Talkin Ducks when we come back. You're watching Talkin Ducks, built by Par Lumber. Georgia right now as a program, at least to me, Dan, looks better than peak Alabama has at times when you look at what they've done to the field over the last 2 seasons and how they have just really developed into a factory down there.
Yeah, and it's a timing thing as well. So that it worked out with Stetson Bennett, who was another one of those full-on grown-up quarterbacks, I think 25 years old, that it worked out with him.
45 now, actually.
Yeah. And he, consistently beat out guys who were recruited much more heavily out of high school, notably JT Daniels when he transferred in. It worked out really, really well for Georgia because of, one, the depth that they were able to build out. And if you look at the early Kirby Smart teams, they were not anywhere near this roster. And so it took time. It takes depth. And one of the secret sauces of college football is that combination of whose third string is best, whose second string is best. So what Georgia's done so much on defense is rotating guys in and out. They have fresh legs, and there's no drop-off between the ones and twos. Zero drop-off. And then come next season, when the ones have graduated or declared early, those twos were kind of pseudo starters already. So there's this unbelievable wealth of experience with schools like Georgia, Alabama, Ohio State. When they're blowing teams out, those twos and threes are getting so much more time than a good school that's winning by 7, that's winning by 10, that's winning by 3. And so they're building up so much more experience depth. And the other thing, and as you know, as somebody who played at a top flight school, when you are on a talented roster, you are just playing against better players in practice. And it's a cliche for a reason, but when Georgia players get to practice against Georgia players, everything is easier. They're so much more confident, right? It's the donut on your bat in the on-deck circle. You take that off and everything, the bat swings smoothly. And so it's such a huge advantage that these guys get to raise their games. It's the old Venus and Serena thing. Why is Serena better? Because she got to learn tennis against Venus Williams. Yeah. And so it's a huge deal. And so I think it's going to be a big deal for Oregon as their roster keeps moving on up. I think it's going to be a big deal for teams in the SEC and in the Big Ten as time goes on. But that's the difference to me. That Mizzou can keep it close, Kentucky can keep it close, but they can't close because Georgia players just have it because of how they practice.
Yeah, really good points. I think for Oregon, again, you've got to build up that talent. But then I think for these Pac-12 schools, it's going to come down to, do we have the better quarterback, and do we at least have enough horses at those key positions to hang there? But right now, it feels like Georgia quarterback's outplaying everybody, and as you mentioned, that depth. And it'll be fascinating to see what the conference can do to bridge that gap, because the last thought I had was, it feels like coaching-wise, too, you've got some great coaches in the Pac-12, but you don't have right now the Pete Carroll coming in at USC, right? That completely changed the game. Or fresh Chip Kelly that was able to introduce something new. Where does that advantage come from? That would be my biggest question mark for the Pac-12 moving forward.
It's defensive line. Because in terms of the bodies on the West Coast, you can find great offensive linemen. Obviously, we know about the skill talent up and down the West Coast and sort of the West Coast footprint. You can find quarterbacks, as we've seen all of college football. Bryce Young and, DJU didn't fully work out for Clemson, but CJ Stroud. These are guys going to be taken in the top 5 of the NFL draft, playing in the playoffs, playing at a high level. So I think Pac-12 teams will have great quarterbacks. They will find defensive backs. You can find speed. You can find offensive linemen. I think the secret sauce in the Pac-12 moving forward is who can scout, find, develop, and get buy-in from big dudes on the defensive line. Because if you're a team with a quarterback, with a guy or guys who can get after the quarterback, and guy or guys who can tackle in the open field, the conference is a wrap. That's it. Yeah. Because everybody else can find everything else. The secret sauce is going to be who can find Kayvon Thibodeau, who can find Tooley from USC, who can find the guys who can become those gravitational players that offensive coordinators have to build game plans around. Those guys are not on the West Coast. That's the secret sauce in the conference.
Or as you'd like to say, that's the Detroit pie.
That's
that
the
Pac-12 is
Detroit,
trying to
that
get to someday.
crispy
And that's how we
edge.
bring it full circle and slice it up into 8 slices here. So, all right, Dan, my friend, thanks again for joining us. Good luck with everything, and we'll catch up with you soon, okay?
My pleasure. Anytime.
All right, take it easy. Now, when we come back, Kelly Graves is going to join us. We'll sit down with the Oregon women's head basketball coach and see what he's enjoyed so much about his team this season, and also catch up on why some of these games have been so close for them in conference play. We'll have more Talkin Ducks when we come back. You're watching Talkin Ducks, built by Par Lumber. Time now for our rock solid pick, brought to you by Milan Stoneworks. Milan Stoneworks, bringing you the finest stoneworks in all the Northwest. All right, Kelly Graves, Oregon women's basketball top 20 program. Couple of close games in conference play here recently, but Coach Graves is having a great time this season. So we sit down, we have a chat, and learn why he's having so much fun with this year's groups of players and what he sees in the future for them.
I'm having a blast. I love this team. I truly do. I think there's great synergy here. There's great chemistry both on and off the court. They're a lot of fun to coach because they want to be coached. They want to be good. Their focus is basketball. Obviously, they're students. They're student athletes. I get that. I understand that. But when it's practice time, they want to compete, and that doesn't always happen. And you mentioned it the last couple of years. We had talent. It was just, it didn't always mesh. And I didn't do a good job as a coach of putting it all together. But this year, again, it's every day. In fact, we practice here in about an hour, and I can't wait. I can't wait to get out there because I know I'm going to have, 9 players. And we just added one, Sammy Wagner, high school player that enrolled early. You see it in football a lot. You don't see it in basketball much. But so she'll be here and practicing with us. So I'm just really excited to work with them each and every day because I know they love each other. They play for each other. And I think that's, you're seeing dividends of that on the court.
So it's mid-January. I mean, you guys, as we mentioned, 4 losses, the top 15 teams. You've got a group that plays hard. You've got a stud freshman that's going to obviously be leading the way for you for several years. I mean, you said it here. You love this team. What does this team expect now going into the rest of conference play? What are you telling them as far as, hey, this is what's out there to accomplish, and really just for us to get here at this point as we get set to go through conference play and then eventually get to the postseason?
Yeah, well, you mentioned the 4 losses, top 15 teams. That our kids are frustrated by that because we feel we're definitely one of those teams. I know we've been ranked all year. I get that. I don't really put much into those. But I think we feel like we can be one of the nation's elite teams. And for whatever reason, we just haven't gotten that done in some of those big games. We do have some good wins, certainly. But yeah, we have high expectations. We think we're going to be in the conference race right to the end. And we'll see what plays out. So that the couple of teams ahead of us, we still have to play. So I think we're in a good position. This is definitely an NCAA tournament team. That can be a really good seed and certainly win multiple games in the tournament. Beyond that, I don't know. Obviously, it takes a little bit of luck, the right matchup, lots of other things. But we certainly have the talent to get a lot done this year.
Big thanks as always to Kelly Graves, and that'll do it for this edition of Talkin Ducks. But don't forget to join us next week. We'll have more transfer news, I imagine, in the portal as it continues, and then men's basketball, big weekend. Women's basketball also taking on more conference opponents. From all of us here, thanks again for your support, and we'll see you next time on Talkin Ducks.